Hey Darren, how's it going over there?
It's going well. Thanks, Jeff, for the intro. It's great to be chatting about Stanford, and hope I can provide a little bit of perspective from, both a student perspective and also an employee perspective on what it's like to work in the energy industry.
So talk to us a little bit about, electrical engineering major all the way to Forbes 30 under 30. Tell us about that trek.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not as planned out as you might think. Of course, I think it's important to have a plan. It's important to go out knowing what you want to do. I actually started getting interested in energy at the end of high school after I had read this book called Hot, Flat, and Crowded by Thomas Friedman. And in that book, it was saying how renewable energy is important not only for environmental reasons, but also for economic reasons, for our technological edge, and also for job security, national security, and energy independence. So it's really more than just an environmental cause these days. So with that, I decided to go into Stanford and try to find out where I could work on projects that would be beneficial for renewable energy. So my company was Dragonfly Systems. We started out of Stanford. A couple of classmates and I actually spun this out at the end of our sophomore year. But now we are all working with SunPower, which, as you might know, was also started at Stanford back in the 1980s. And it's actually its 30th anniversary this year.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about that transition. I guess let's start off with SunPower because you're currently there. For current students that are thinking about working there or even interning there, tell us a little bit about the culture, the problems you guys are trying to solve. Go SunPower.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, a brief overview about SunPower. SunPower is one of the largest solar companies in the world, second largest one in the US, and we generate billions in revenue. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're playing in every single field in solar. So I'm sure our marketing folks can tell you a lot more, but we are a vertically integrated solar company, meaning we make the cells, the modules, and then we also build the systems and create financing for those systems as well. Not only are we vertically integrated, but we also play across the entire horizontal sector. So we do residential systems, we do commercial systems, and we also do large-scale utility systems. So if you take a look, SunPower is a pretty big company. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved in wherever your interest is, really, in solar.
So, I think something that matters to current Stanford students, after reading the Business Insider article that came out not too long ago, a list of things that matter. One was making an impact. So tell us about the kind of impact a student might be able to make working at a place like SunPower.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start that off by saying, maybe some of the people on this watching this video have seen Apple's recent announcement about all the things it's doing to tackle climate change and to boost renewable energy and energy efficiency and recycling materials. SunPower is actually a core part of activities like that. Without companies like SunPower, those things just wouldn't be possible. We've been doing this for 30 years, but recently there's been an announcement that SunPower is building systems for Apple in China to power its activities there. And also for Stanford, actually. There's, I think, about 73 megawatts being built for Stanford, both on Stanford property and also off Stanford property. So you can see that there's a very tangible impact for people in all industries, really.
For sure. And so you have a real interesting way of having come about to SunPower, and that was through your work at Dragonfly Systems. So flip into kind of the entrepreneurial Darren. Tell us a little bit about how Dragonfly Systems came about and what was the problem you were trying to solve.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, my co-founders and I actually started off with a freshman seminar class called Green Electronics. It was taught by Professor Bill Daly. This was a freshman seminar, and it was so difficult that at the end of the year, the professor said, okay, we've got to turn this from a freshman seminar into a senior capstone. But we were really lucky to be able to take that class, really lucky to have a professor who was willing to walk us through these steps. And the class was all about using electronics for energy efficiency and to maximize energy generation out of things like solar panels. So the final project of that class ended up, turning into an independent research study. We thought we could do a more efficient version of what's called maximum power point tracking on solar panels. We worked on that for about a year, a little over a year, created a patent, which we filed with the Stanford OTL, and then we decided, hey, we could spin this technology out into a company. So at the end of our sophomore year, we decided to take a chance and go out, take a leave of absence from Stanford and work on this technology. Now, after a while, we did modify our technology slightly, but that's how we got started.
So if I'm a current Stanford student and I'm thinking, look at what Darren's done, a cool class project, taking that all the way to something truly real and entrepreneurial, a startup, call it. What are some steps that I should be thinking about if I want to kind of mirror what you've done, get something off the ground?
Well, there's no real formula, but I think something that you really want to keep in mind is in addition to learning, you also want to work on projects. And one thing that I've noticed just from my experience is, without projects and without working on something hands-on, it's really quite difficult to really understand the problems out there. Even in my time working on this company and working at SunPower, I have found a lot more problems out there that can't be solved. And really, that's the way you need to figure out where a business or where your technology needs to be to solve those problems. So I highly encourage people to get their hands dirty and work on a project in addition to learning the fundamentals.
So now, for students that are thinking this kind of startup route versus going to, say, a big company, you've kind of dabbled in both. How would you advise a current student that's thinking, I have this fork in the road, what do I do?
At the end of the day, it's a little bit of a personality call. Also, it's a little bit of luck. Doing a startup is hard. So it's not to put people off, but you want to really make sure that when you're doing it, you're able to commit to it, and you're willing to you're willing to work really hard. So, for instance, my co-founders and I didn't take a salary while we were in the startup, and that's what allowed us to keep going a little bit longer. On the other hand, working in a big company, you have a lot of resources. Though the conventional wisdom is maybe it's not as exciting as a startup. Well, I would say that that's not necessarily the case. It really depends on which group you're in the large company. What is the company as a whole like? So you can be involved in a lot of exciting initiatives as part of a large company. So between choosing a startup or a large company, if you see a problem that no one else is tackling and you feel like it's an important problem to solve, go for the startup. And if you're willing to work hard and potentially fail, go for the startup.
Now you mentioned kind of the benefits of a big organization. So did my homework on you and saw that you also interned at NASA. So for current students out there that are thinking about NASA as a place to work or intern, tell us a little bit about your experience there.
NASA is an interesting place. So I was actually interning at NASA Ames, and there's a lot more happening at NASA than I had originally realized. Our conventional thinking is NASA is about space, right? But it's a big part of it is also the aeronautics part of it. So I actually worked on some next generation aircraft concepts. My mentor there was working on distributed propulsion, sort of hybrid electrical and conventional fuel powered aircraft, and how we could use that to improve aircraft efficiency. So it was a fun experience, a lot of interesting jobs and tasks to do. Again, I think because it's such a big organization, how much you get out of it is a function of how much you put into it and also what group you're in.
And now I love asking this question because here at the Career Development Center at Stanford, we advise students on kind of tips on how to get in with a company. Clearly, you've had some success. So talk to us about SunPower and NASA specifically. What was your inroad into those organizations? Applying online, networking? How did it work out for you?
Well, I'll start with the easy one first. SunPower, the way we got into SunPower was actually we were acquired. So I didn't really see the HR process there. Unfortunately, I can't advise too many people on that. But it's definitely always good to know someone in there. And it's not that knowing someone there means it's not based on merit. It's knowing someone in there will allow you to better understand what the kind of people you're going to be working with are, and what sort of projects are happening there. Are you really interested in it? And it'll help you brush up a bit of your background so you know what you should expect going in. So definitely try to talk with as many people as possible in the organization. That's helpful.
Okay, and then how about for NASA? How did you get in with them?
Same deal, really. But NASA does have a much more structured application process. There's, I think, a portal online where you can apply. But so definitely go for that. Always go through the conventional process as well. But it's always good to talk to someone there as well and hear what it's like. Are you interested in it? So I would say actually the same advice for both.
For sure. And so you've done something now by taking a leave of absence from Stanford to pursue an opportunity that probably some students think about. So talk to us a little bit about the process of making that happen for yourself. Is it frowned upon? Is it okay? How is it for you?
Well, I feel like there isn't all the hype at Stanford today about leaving school and doing a startup. I feel like it's hardly frowned upon, at least at Stanford. But I do know that it's not an easy decision to make, really. And personally, my family was very supportive of it. I know not everyone's family will be supportive of it, or not even your family, but your friends, whatever. But I think, at least at Stanford and in Silicon Valley, there are a lot more resources for you, and a lot more people kind of encouraging you to give it a shot. So it wasn't, the way I looked at it was, if I took a leave of absence from Stanford to work on this company, the worst thing that could happen is that the company would fail. And after it failed, I would go back to Stanford. So it's hardly a bad situation to be in anyway. So I think I was very lucky to have Stanford as, a backup. Stanford's not a backup, but you can see, it's just a good position to be in.
So Stanford as a backup. No, it's not. Clear.
It's not a backup. I guess it's a good alternative. That's how I'll say it. Yeah.
For sure. And I guess what do you ever plan on coming back? Is another question, as students might think that as they say, "Oh, I'm going to pursue something else." Do I ever come back?
Yeah, this is a question that I've talked about with several other people who have thought about taking some time off from Stanford. And again, it's a very personal decision. I personally believe that I will come back at some point because Stanford's a great place to be. There's a lot of interesting projects happening, and it's also a really fun place to be, just from a social standpoint. So yes, I think it's good to finish up that experience. In terms of when you want to do it, I think that's totally up to you and your unique circumstances.
Now let's talk about during your time here at Stanford, what you chose to study, electrical engineering. We have a lot of freshmen and sophomore students out there kind of considering, what should I major in? And there's so much out there. There's the pressures of computer science, and then there's just so many options. So yeah. How did you make that decision? And how might you advise some students that are currently confronting that decision?
I think I took a very roundabout course to get to electrical engineering, to be honest. So when I first came to Stanford, coming in from high school, I really loved physics. I thought physics was going to be my major. After just getting to Stanford, I realized that most of what I thought was interesting in physics had already been done. So there's a lot of very theoretical things happening. Thought it might not be exactly my boat. So I went to material science and actually worked under Professor Mike McGehee. He is one of the leading researchers in alternative materials for solar cells. So I worked in his group looking at organic solar cells and improving the reliability of those. At the end of the day, though, I felt maybe it's a little more chemistry heavy than I would have anticipated. I wanted to stick to the physics of it. So electrical engineering seemed to be the next logical choice, where you kind of get a holistic experience where you have math, you have physics, but you also have very practical applications. So whatever you're building, you can be pretty certain it's going to have an impact. So a little more engineering focused rather than science focused per se. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it totally does. Totally does. And definitely another question I want to get in here before we end is talk to us about being on Forbes 30 under 30. I mean, that's something that I bet a lot of folks might have even watched this video just for, is to see someone that's been on that list. What's that experience been like? Did your life change after it happened? Tell us about being on Forbes 30 under 30.
Yeah, hardly. Well, my life has hardly changed, really. I think my experience, having met some other people under Forbes 30 under 30 as well, has been that it's something that sort of springs up on you and you don't even realize it. And to be honest, most of the people who are on that list are so busy that they say that they're surprised for a day and then they get back to work. So it's definitely fun. I think the best thing about it is you get to meet a lot of other interesting people. So you know, for instance, this past fall, we were actually all invited to the first Forbes conference, under 30 conference in Philadelphia, and that was a fantastic experience. So we went to Philadelphia, got to see a lot of amazing panelists and speakers, ranging from the founder of, you know, the Oculus Rift, Palmer Luckey, to the founder of Spanx, which is Sarah Blakely. So we saw a lot of amazing people speak. We got a chance to meet a lot of amazing people. So I think that's the fun part. It's really something fun. But in terms of whether my life changed or not, you know, not really.
Gotcha. And Darren, so I guess probably the question I'll close with for our chat today is this one. And so for Stanford students that want to learn from the path you've taken, what were the moments in your Stanford career that put you on the trajectory to where you are now?
I think the first thing is knowing what area you want to be in. So for me, that was renewable energy. And that can change. So what I tell a lot of people, especially, you know, I have a younger sister who's a freshman, and she always asks me, well, you know, I'm not completely sure I want to do this, or I'm not sure if I want A or B. And I tell her, you know, the best thing to do is just go and do A or to do B. And if you realize that you really like it, or you realize you really don't like it, then you switch. But I think at some point people need to go and commit and try something. And through that, you'll learn and gain some experience. And then you can change your plan. But you should always have a plan. You should never not commit and just sort of wander around. So I think knowing what you kind of want to do from the start, but you can also change it, be flexible enough to change it in the future. In terms of some more concrete steps that I've taken, I think really finding some great mentors. So, for instance, one is Professor McGehee, who I worked with over the summer doing some research. Also, that Professor Bill Daly, who was working with us in the class, Green Electronics. And the last thing is meet a good team of people. So my team was obviously my co-founders, fantastic people, very capable, and also just fun to be around. I think that's the most valuable thing you can do at Stanford.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Darren. I think the students will have taken a lot from hearing about your experience in getting all the way to SunPower, being of the entrepreneurial spirit that we have so much of here at Stanford with Dragonfly Systems, and just so many awesome tips. And all that while being quite a modest guy. So
Thanks, Jeff.
For sure. And so we appreciate your time today. Thanks for tuning in to Unplugged at Stanford, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Darren.